The stench hit me first, a nauseating blend of bargain basement perfume, fermented wine, and pure entitlement. My vessel, my pride and joy, the Aurora, resembled the aftermath of a rock concert gone terribly wrong. Red Solo cups littered every surface, a suspicious dark puddle stained the deck, and shattered glass sparkled ominously near the steering wheel. Beside me on the pier, my wife Sarah stood motionless, arms folded tight across her chest. Her jaw clenched with such intensity I worried about her teeth. Sarah's loyalty runs deep, and when she falls silent like this, she's more dangerous than any tempest. Her gaze directed me toward the helm, where something grotesque clung to the polished wood. A single, ridiculously long, obviously synthetic eyelash. No question who it belonged to. It practically screamed Linda Morrison. Linda was our subdivision's self-crowned monarch, chairwoman of the Homeowners Association. She probably starched her undergarments and expected applause for simply existing. Her sister, Melissa, was essentially a clone. Same attitude, less authority, more desperation. Together, they formed a two-headed hydra of petty regulations and bitter stares. I'd been traveling for work for just 4 days. 4 measly days, that's all it took for them to decide my private pier and my 70-foot vessel were communal property. They'd scaled my secured gate, used a duplicate key Linda had certainly made without permission, and hosted an all-out celebration. "I'm going to destroy her," Sarah muttered, her voice gravelly and low. "I'm marching over to her pristine lawn and using those ridiculous plastic flamingos to demolish every window in sight." I placed a calming hand on her shoulder. "Easy now. Breathe slowly." My own fury burned like hot coals in my gut. I'm generally easygoing, but I have zero tolerance for two things: threats to my family and violations of my property. This wasn't merely a party, it was a declaration. Linda was announcing she could do whatever she pleased, whenever she chose, that regulations didn't apply to her, that I was merely a tenant in her realm. Stepping aboard, my shoes crunched through broken glass. The ivory leather seating bore ugly wine stains resembling psychological ink blots. Someone had attempted unsuccessfully to scrawl their name in sunscreen on the cabin wall. I ran my hand across the helm, my knuckles bone white. I'd saved for a decade to purchase this vessel. It wasn't simply a luxury, it was my sanctuary. This was where Sarah and I escaped reality. Observed sunsets, felt genuine freedom. They desecrated it, transforming my refuge into a floating garbage heap. "What's your plan?" Sarah asked, searching my face. She anticipated an explosion, expected me to storm Linda's residence screaming. That's the volatile side she knows intimately. But staring at that fake eyelash, an unusual calmness washed over me. Cold and crystalline, like ice water. Shouting wouldn't repair the damage or restore the cushions. It would merely give Linda satisfaction, proving she'd gotten under my skin. I refused to grant her that pleasure. "I'm cleaning it up," I stated evenly. Sarah looked at me like I'd sprouted another head. "That's your response?" "Just clean?" I surveyed the disaster. The mess was terrible, but the disrespect was worse. This was a calculated provocation designed to push me toward something foolish, allowing her to fine me or place a lien on my property. She wanted confrontation on her terms, before the HOA board she controlled. She expected me to be the irrational, angry man. Fine. I could play a different game entirely. I picked up the fake eyelash between my fingers. Cheap plastic, pathetic and silly, just like them. A plan began forming, beautiful in its simplicity and utterly wicked in execution. I turned to Sarah, a slow smile spreading across my face. Not a happy smile, the kind predators wear before striking. "First we clean," I said. "Then we invite them back," Sarah's eyes widened. "Invite them back? Have you lost your mind?" "Absolutely," I said, dropping the eyelash into a garbage bag. "I'm inviting Linda and Melissa on a lovely sunset cruise next weekend. Just the 3 of us, my treat. A peace offering." I could see the wheels turning. She knew me. She knew that smile meant I wasn't seeking peace, I was seeking retribution. The kind they'd never anticipate, happening far offshore where screams go unheard. That afternoon I walked to Linda's house. Her lawn was, as Sarah had observed, immaculate. She sat on her porch in a wicker chair sipping iced tea, radiating smugness. Melissa sat beside her, filing her nails. Both looked up as I approached, wearing masks of feigned innocence. "May I help you?" Linda asked, condescension dripping from every word. I raised my hands peacefully, maintaining my smile. "Linda, Melissa, I wanted to apologize." They exchanged confused glances. Apologize for what? Linda asked suspiciously. For the misunderstanding, I said smoothly. I heard there was a gathering on my vessel while I was away. I apologize for not being present to host properly. The boat must have been a disaster when you left. I should have stocked it for you. Their jaws dropped. This was completely unexpected. They'd anticipated yelling, providing them ammunition. Instead, I was apologizing. Melissa giggled, a high-pitched grating sound. Oh, it was nothing serious. Just a few friends. Well, to make amends, I continued, smile unwavering. I'd like to formally invite you both on a sunset cruise next Saturday. Just us three. We'll have wine, watch the sun descend. No interruptions. Linda's eyes lit up triumphantly. She thought she'd won, that I was surrendering, trying to regain her favor. She saw me as a dog successfully disciplined with a newspaper. Well, she said, attempting graciousness, I suppose we could adjust our schedules. That would be lovely. She thought she was receiving a complimentary cruise, being rewarded for terrible behavior. What she didn't realize was that she wasn't accepting an invitation. She was walking straight into a trap I'd just finished constructing. It never begins with the boat. It starts small with dreams. Our dream was a modest house in a peaceful waterside enclave called Sunset Bay, a barrier island community with the Atlantic rolling beyond the dunes. When Sarah and I first saw it, we fell completely in love. It had a spacious backyard for a future dog, a porch swing, and water views that felt like permanent vacation. We were young newlyweds, and this house would be our foundation. The first year was perfect, everything we'd hoped for. We painted rooms, planted gardens, met neighbors. Most were like us, ordinary people seeking peace. Then Linda Morrison was elected Homeowners Association president. Initially, it seemed harmless. She campaigned on maintaining property values and community standards. We all voted for her. It sounded reasonable. We had no idea we were electing a dictator. The first warning sign was the mailbox regulation. Our perfectly adequate standard black mailbox was suddenly declared non-compliant. We received a letter on thick official feeling paper stating all mailboxes must be a specific beige shade, purchased from a specific company for $300. A company I later discovered owned by Linda's brother-in-law. I was irritated, but Sarah, ever pragmatic, suggested letting it go. It's not worth fighting. Let's just purchase the stupid mailbox and maintain peace. So we did. But it wasn't about mailboxes. It was about control. Soon, regulations covered everything. Flower types, front door colors, guest numbers. Fines were issued for trash cans left out 1 hour past pickup. Holiday decorations remaining 1 day late. Grass a 1/4 inch too tall. It was madness. Our neighbor, a sweet elderly gentleman named Mr. Patterson, was fined $200 because a storm knocked shingles off his roof, and he didn't replace them within the 48-hour window Linda's new rule required. The man was 80 years old on fixed income. Sarah and I repaired his roof ourselves, but the fine remained. We felt like we lived in a police state with Linda as judge and jury. She'd patrol in her golf cart, clipboard in lap, sour expression fixed, hunting for infractions. Melissa often rode shotgun, pointing out supposed violations with gleeful eyes. The real conflict started over my truck. I own a large, slightly battered Ford F-150, a work truck. I'm a contractor. I build things for a living. I need my truck. But Linda decided it was an eyesore. She passed a new rule at an emergency HOA meeting nobody was told about. No commercial vehicles in driveways overnight. I received a notice on my windshield stating I must park my truck in my garage. Problem was, my truck didn't fit in my garage, too long. This time I didn't let it go. This attacked my livelihood. I attended the next HOA meeting, ready for confrontation. I stood and explained calmly at first that the rule was unreasonable, that my truck was also my personal vehicle, and forcing me to park it elsewhere was a hardship. Linda just smiled that cold, reptilian smile. Regulations are regulations. If you don't like them, perhaps Sunset Bay isn't the community for you. The other board members, all cronies she'd appointed, nodded like bobbleheads. That's when my temper erupted. I lost control. I told her exactly what I thought of her and her ridiculous little kingdom. I might have called her a petty dictator. I might have suggested she use her clipboard for something anatomically impossible. It wasn't my finest moment, but it felt satisfying. Of course, it made things worse. From that day forward, I was her primary enemy. She targeted us relentlessly. We received fines for imaginary infractions, excessive pollen on our porch, our flag making too much noise and wind. It was harassment, pure and simple. Through everything, my saving grace was my neighbor on the other side, George. Neighbor George was a retired guy who'd seen it all and found most of it hilarious. He had binoculars he used for bird watching, but I knew he was really observing neighborhood drama unfold. He'd call me. "Hey, buddy," he'd say. "Just so you know, Dictator Linda is on patrol. She just spent 5 minutes measuring your hedges." Looked genuinely angry they were up to code. He was my comic relief, reminding me this was all absurd. After a particularly brutal year dealing with Linda's nonsense, I finally closed a lifetime deal. A major construction project that paid enough for me to finally purchase what I'd always dreamed of, a boat. Not just any boat, a beautiful 70-foot yacht. I named her the Aurora after my wife because they were both sleek, powerful, and the best thing that ever happened to me. The boat was my declaration of independence, my escape pod from Linda's world. I had my own private pier, my space. She couldn't touch me there, or so I believed. The day I brought the boat home, I saw Linda watching from her porch, her eyes narrowed to jealous slits. She couldn't tolerate seeing someone else happy. Couldn't stand that I possessed something she couldn't control. A week later, I received an HOA notice, a new special waterfront assessment, a $5,000 fee for all homes with piers to pay for aquatic vegetation management. There was no aquatic vegetation problem. It was a tax for having something she didn't. I fought it, naturally. I attended the meeting with evidence, with photographs of perfectly clear water, but she had the votes. The board approved it without discussion. She just smiled across the room, a look of pure, spiteful victory on her face. It wasn't about vegetation, it was about punishment. About her reminding me that no matter where I went, she was in charge. That was the moment I knew this would never end. It would only intensify. Peace was no longer an option. She'd pushed me too far, and now I had to push back. The special waterfront assessment felt like a gut punch, but the fence dispute became the main battleground. After paying the fraudulent $5,000 fee, I decided I needed to secure my property. I wanted a new, higher fence around the back of my yard leading to the pier. Not just for privacy, but to establish a clear boundary that even Linda's overreaching scrutiny couldn't legally cross without trespassing. I submitted plans to the HOA Architectural Review Committee, which Linda naturally chaired. I followed every single regulation in the handbook. The fence was the correct height, appropriate material, approved color. There was no legitimate reason for denial. A week later, the denial letter arrived. The reason cited: aesthetic disruption to the community's natural coastline. Complete nonsense. A direct personal insult. I called Linda, no answer. I emailed her, no reply. I went to her house, but she refused to open the door, just peeked through the blinds like a cornered animal. She was avoiding me because she knew she had no justification. She was simply exercising power, enjoying her ability to refuse just because she could. Sarah was livid. "This is insane," she said, pacing our kitchen. "She can't just do that. It's our property. We have to challenge this." She was right. But I knew fighting Linda through her own corrupt system was like trying to extinguish a fire with gasoline. So I did something I probably shouldn't have. I built the fence anyway. I hired a crew, and over one weekend we erected a beautiful, solid 6-foot privacy fence. It was perfect and completely against her direct order. The consequences were immediate. The next Monday morning, a notice appeared on my new fence, a massive bright red sign reading "Unauthorized Construction." It came with a letter informing me I had 72 hours to remove it or face fines of $1,000 daily. And if the fines weren't paid, the HOA would place a lien on my house, a lien. She was threatening to take my home. This was no longer about mailboxes or work trucks. This was war. That's it, I told Sarah. She's crossed a line there's no coming back from. My volatile nature, the one I'd been trying to contain, was starting to boil over. But Sarah, my strong, intelligent Sarah, placed a hand on my chest. "Yelling won't solve this," she said firmly. "We need a strategy. A real strategy. We need to go over her head. We need an attorney." She was right. We found a lawyer specializing in HOA disputes. He reviewed our case, the pile of bogus fines, the fence denial, the lien threat. He was practically salivating. "Oh, she's violated at least half a dozen state statutes," he said with a grin. "This is straightforward. We'll sue her and the entire board. The threat of litigation was like cold water on Linda. Suddenly, she was willing to negotiate. We had a mediation session. Me, Sarah, our lawyer, and Linda with the HOA's attorney. Melissa came along for moral support, which meant she sat there glaring at us the entire time. Linda was a different person with lawyers present. All sweetness and light, claiming it was all a terrible misunderstanding. She claimed the fence denial was a clerical error. She agreed to approve the fence. She agreed to waive the fines. She even agreed to drop the ridiculous waterfront assessment fee. We had won. We'd called her bluff and she'd folded. As we were leaving, I caught a flicker of something in her eyes. It wasn't defeat. It was hatred, pure, concentrated hatred. She'd been publicly humiliated, forced to back down. And I knew a woman like Linda Morrison would never ever forget that. She'd be seeking revenge. That's when my major project, the one that paid for the boat, hit a critical phase. I had to travel out of town for a week to supervise the final construction stage. I didn't want to go. I had a terrible feeling in my gut. I don't like leaving you here alone, I told Sarah the night before my flight. Don't worry about me, she said, trying to sound brave. What's she going to do? She knows we'll sue her again if she tries anything. But I wasn't convinced. A cornered animal is dangerous, and I'd just cornered Linda Morrison. I felt like I was leaving my wife in a cage with a wounded viper. Before I left, I secured everything. The house, the garage, the gate to the pier. I even installed a new padlock just in case. The business trip was stressful. I worked long hours trying to get home as quickly as possible. I called Sarah every night. On the second day, she sounded strained. It's nothing, she said. But Linda has been driving past the house slowly, like 3 or 4 times every hour. My blood ran cold. She was watching, waiting. On the third day, neighbor George called me. Hey, buddy, he said, his voice low. Just a heads up. The Wicked Witch and her flying monkey sister were down by your pier about an hour ago. They were tampering with the lock on your gate. I told Sarah to call the police if she saw them again, but we both knew it wouldn't accomplish anything. They'd just claim they were taking a walk. There was nothing we could do. I felt completely helpless hundreds of miles away while this venomous woman circled my home, circled my wife. I knew she was planning something. I knew she was going to retaliate for the humiliation I'd caused. I just didn't know how. I thought about the fence, about the fines. I never imagined her target would be my boat. I never imagined she and her sister would be brazen enough to commit a felony. But I'd underestimated her thirst for revenge. And as I sat in my hotel room, a deep sense of dread settled over me. I knew that when I returned home, something was going to be terribly, terribly wrong. The 4th day of my trip was the worst. Sarah called, her voice shaking. They're having a party, she said, her words barely a whisper. On our boat. On the Aurora. I felt the phone become slick in my hand. What do you mean a party? I can hear them from the house, she said, her breath catching. Loud music, people yelling. I went to the end of the lawn. It's them. It's Linda and Melissa and a whole group of their friends. They're on our boat acting like they own it. Call the police, Sarah, right now, I ordered, my mind racing. Tell them it's trespassing, breaking and entering. I could hear the fear in her voice, and it was twisting my insides. She was alone there, and these people were brazen enough to throw a party on a boat that wasn't theirs, in a neighborhood where they were supposed to be enforcing the rules. It was a staggering level of arrogance. I did, she said, a tremor finally breaking through. The dispatcher said they'd send a car when one was available, but they said because it's an HOA president, it's probably a misunderstanding. They told me not to approach them, a misunderstanding. I wanted to smash the phone against the wall. This was Linda using her position, her title, to get away with a crime right in the open. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was demonstrating to me and the whole neighborhood that she was untouchable. Neighbor George called me minutes later. Buddy, you're not going to believe this, he said, sounding more amazed than angry. It's like a music video down there. People are dancing on your deck. Melissa just did a cannonball off the side. I think she lost her bikini top. The comic relief wasn't helping. All I could picture was my beautiful boat being destroyed by these entitled fools. George, can you get pictures? I asked, my voice tight. Video, anything. Way ahead of you, he said. Got the telephoto lens out. I'm documenting the whole sordid affair. Linda's pouring red wine straight from the bottle into some guy's mouth. This is going to be great evidence. I hung up, feeling a wave of fury and helplessness wash over me. I was stuck hundreds of miles away while my home was being invaded. My wife was being intimidated and my property was being trashed. Every minute felt like an hour. I couldn't work. I couldn't think. All I could do was pace my small hotel room and imagine all the ways I was going to make Linda Morrison regret the day she was born. The party apparently lasted for hours. Sarah said the police car finally drove by, slowed down, and then just kept going. Linda must have seen them coming and fed them some story. The music finally died around 2 in the morning. The next day, I was on the first flight home. I didn't even pack properly, just threw my belongings in my bag and left. The entire flight I was simmering. I wasn't hot-headed anymore. The anger had cooled and hardened into something else, something colder and sharper. Sarah picked me up from the airport. She didn't have to say a word. I could see the stress and fear in her eyes. When we got home, the first thing I did was walk to the pier, and that's when I saw it. The scene was even worse than I'd imagined. It wasn't just messy, it was desecrated. They'd shown complete and utter contempt for us for our property. That's when Sarah pointed out the single fake eyelash stuck to the helm. It was the final insult. A tiny, ridiculous trophy left behind by the victor. And that's when the shift happened. Not in the world, but in my head. Sarah was expecting an explosion. She put her hand on my back, ready to absorb the shockwave of my temper. But it never came. I looked at the broken glass, the stained cushions, the sticky deck. I looked at the pathetic little eyelash and I started to laugh. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a low, chilling sound that even surprised me. Sarah took a step back. "What's so funny?" she asked, her brow furrowed with worry. "They think this is the end," I said, a wide, predatory grin spreading across my face. "They think they won. They threw their little party, they trashed our boat, and they think they've put me in my place." I turned to her, my eyes shining with newfound clarity. "This isn't the end, Sarah, this is the beginning. This is the gift I've been waiting for." She was completely confused. "A gift? They destroyed the boat. This is going to cost a fortune to repair." "The boat can be repaired," I said, waving a dismissive hand. "But the mistake they just made, that's permanent. They got arrogant. They got sloppy. They committed a crime and they did it in the open with witnesses." I looked from the trashed boat to Linda's perfect house across the water. She was untouchable as an HOA president hiding behind bylaws and committees. But as a common criminal, as a trespasser, that was a whole different story. This wasn't just about revenge for a party anymore. This was bigger. This was about tearing down her entire corrupt empire. And she'd just handed me the wrecking ball. The party wasn't her victory. It was her fatal mistake. And the fake eyelash wasn't a trophy, it was evidence. My plan for a simple sunset cruise suddenly seemed too small. It needed to be bigger. It needed to be more permanent. My friend in the Coast Guard came to mind. I had a feeling he'd be very interested in this story. But he wasn't just a friend, he was part of something much, much bigger. And Linda Morrison had just made herself the star of his next investigation. I came home, saw the wreckage of my boat, and instead of rage, I felt a strange sense of calm, a purpose. This was no longer a neighborhood squabble. This was a war, and Linda had just escalated it in a way she would live to regret. Sarah watched me, her expression a mixture of confusion and concern. My lack of a volcanic eruption was more unnerving to her than any shouting match would have been. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly as I methodically started taking pictures of the damage with my phone. "I want a record of everything. Every stain, every crack, every piece of trash." "I already took pictures," she said. "George has video." "Good," I replied, not looking up. "We need more. We can't have enough." After I documented every square inch of the desecration, I walked back to the house and made a phone call. It wasn't to the police. It wasn't to my lawyer. It was to a man named Marcus Chen. Marcus and I served in the military together. He was a quiet, unassuming guy who was smarter than everyone else in the room combined. After the service, he joined the Coast Guard and moved into their investigative service, the CGIS. He specialized in financial crimes that happened on or around the water. We kept in touch, a call every few months to catch up. I'd told him vaguely about my HOA troubles before. He'd found them amusing, a weird slice of civilian life. But he'd also mentioned in passing that his unit was keeping a casual eye on several waterfront communities in the area. There were whispers of kickback schemes with marine contractors and fraudulent insurance claims related to piers and seawalls. This is the first major twist. My plan wasn't born the moment I saw the trashed yacht. The seeds of it were already there. I had a suspicion, a gut feeling that Linda Morrison's corruption went deeper than beige mailboxes and fence permits. The way she handled the HOA's finances, the special assessments that appeared out of nowhere, the vendors she insisted everyone use, it all smelled suspicious. The party wasn't the thing that started my war. It was the final undeniable piece of evidence that proved Linda Morrison wasn't just a petty tyrant. She was a criminal who felt invincible. Her arrogance was the key. "Marcus," I said when he answered. "It's me. I think I've got something for you." Something significant. I told him everything. The years of harassment, the fines, the threats, and finally the party. I described the breaking and entering, the trespassing, the destruction of property. I sent him the pictures Sarah and George had taken. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "And she's the HOA president?" he finally asked. "The one and only," I confirmed. "She thinks she's above the law. She thinks her title protects her." "Her title is what makes this interesting," Marcus said, his voice now sharp with professional interest. "An HOA president has fiduciary duty. If she's using her position to enrich herself and we can prove it, that's not just a civil matter. We're talking federal charges, wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy." My heart started beating faster. This was it. This was the path. Not just petty revenge, but total annihilation. "The party is your entry point," Marcus explained. "It's a clear, straightforward crime. Trespassing, destruction of property. It gets us in the door. Once we're in, we can start looking at everything else, the books, the contracts, the bank accounts." He continued. "This sister of hers, Melissa, you said she's always with her like a shadow?" "She's the HOA treasurer, by the way," I said. "Convenient, right?" Marcus let out a low whistle. "Oh, you have no idea what a gift this is. This is the crack in the dam. We just need to apply the right kind of pressure in the right place and the whole thing will come down." That's when the Sunset Cruise idea came back to me, but now it had a new, much more potent purpose. It wasn't just about scaring them. It was about separating them. It was about isolating them and turning them against each other. "Marcus," I said, a new plan clicking into place. "I have an idea, a way to serve them up to you on a silver platter." I laid out the plan for the revenge cruise. I would invite them out, sail a few miles offshore, and stage an engine failure. I'd leave them on the yacht panicked and alone. And then he and his team would be the ones to rescue them. "You get them out on federal waters, separated from their lawyers and their comfort zone," Marcus said, catching on immediately. "People get chatty, especially when they're looking at serious jail time. The sister will flip on Linda to save her own skin. I guarantee it." So the twist wasn't just that I had a friend in the Coast Guard. The twist was that I was already a confidential informant in a budding federal investigation. Linda's party wasn't the inciting incident. It was the final nail she hammered into her own coffin. She thought she was delivering a message of dominance, but what she really delivered was a confession wrapped in a bow. I hung up the phone, a cold, hard certainty settling in my chest. I walked back out to the pier where Sarah was scrubbing furiously at a wine stain. She looked up, her face flushed with exertion and anger. "I can't get it out," she said in frustration. "Forget it," I told her, my voice gentle. "Leave it. It's evidence." I then made the walk over to Linda and Melissa's porch. I put on the performance of a lifetime, playing the role of the beaten man extending an olive branch. And they bought it completely. The look of smug triumph on Linda's face as she accepted my invitation was something I would treasure forever. She thought it was a surrender. She had no idea it was a summons. She wasn't getting a free cruise. She was getting a one-way ticket to justice, and I was going to be the one to personally deliver her there. After Linda and Melissa eagerly accepted my peace offering, I walked back to my house feeling a grim satisfaction. The trap was set, but when I saw the look on Sarah's face, my triumphant mood faltered. She was standing on our porch, arms crossed, watching me with an intensity that could peel paint. She knew me too well. She knew the difference between my hot-headed anger and this new cold-blooded resolve, and it scared her. "Okay," she said, her voice low and even, not waiting for me to speak. "What was that? What are you really planning?" I tried to play it off. "What do you mean?" "I'm just trying to make peace. Turn the other cheek, you know." She didn't buy it for a second. She stepped closer, her eyes searching mine. "Don't lie to me. Not about this. I saw your face when you came back from their house. That wasn't a man who just made peace. That was a predator who just cornered his prey. I've seen you angry. I've seen you frustrated. I have never seen you like this. This is different. This is cold, she was right. This was the crossroads. I could either lie to my wife, the one person in the world I trusted completely, or I could bring her into the heart of the storm I was about to create. The core question echoed in my mind. How far will a man go to defend his own? And part of that, I realized, was being honest with the person you were defending. You're right, I said, my voice dropping. It's not about making peace. It's about finishing this. We went inside and sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd planned our future, where we'd celebrated good news and comforted each other through bad. I told her everything. I told her about my friend Marcus Chen in the Coast Guard Investigative Service. I told her about his unit's suspicions about financial crimes in the community. I told her that Linda's party wasn't just trespassing. It was the key that could unlock a much larger federal case. I laid out the whole plan, the sunset cruise, the faked engine trouble, the isolation, and the arrival of Marcus's team. As I spoke, I watched her face cycle through a range of emotions. Shock, then fear, then a dawning understanding. So, this isn't just about getting revenge for the boat, she whispered. This is real, like federal agents in jail time real? Yes, I said. This is real. Linda is a criminal, Sarah, not just a mean lady with a clipboard. She's likely been stealing from all of us for years. The party was just the stupid, arrogant mistake that's going to let us prove it. I could see the moral conflict in her eyes. We were no longer just victims fighting back. We were setting a trap. We were actively conspiring with federal agents to bring someone down. It was a long way from suing over a fence, but what if it goes wrong? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. What if they don't confess? What if this Marcus friend of yours can't prove anything? Linda will come after us with everything she has. She'll ruin us. It was a valid fear. We were taking a huge risk. If our plan failed, Linda would be emboldened and her wrath would be biblical. We could lose our house, our savings, everything we'd worked for. We would be her primary targets for the rest of our lives. I reached across the table and took her hands. They were cold. It's a risk, I admitted. But what's the alternative? We let her get away with it? We let her keep robbing our neighbors? We let her terrorize us for the next 20 years? We live in fear in our own home. I leaned in, my voice earnest. Sarah, she broke into our home. She came onto our property, onto our boat, the boat I named after you, and she defiled it. She did it to show us she has all the power. If we don't take that power away from her, she will never stop. This is our one shot to end it for good. I could see the battle raging inside her. The part of her that wanted peace, that wanted to avoid conflict, was at war with the fierce, protective part that knew I was right. She was loyal, my Sarah, but she was also strong. She straightened her back, and the fear in her eyes was replaced by a familiar fire. Okay, she said, her voice firm again. What do you need me to do? A wave of relief so powerful it almost made me dizzy washed over me. I wasn't in this alone. We were in this together, like always. I need you to be my alibi and my witness, I said. On the day of the cruise, I need you to be visible. Go to the community pool. Talk to people. Mention how generous I'm being trying to smooth things over with Linda. Create a narrative, and when they don't come back, I need you to be the worried wife who calls the Coast Guard for help. Her eyes widened. So you're going to be out there alone with them? I have to be, I said. And I need neighbor George. He's going to be my eyes on the shore. Later that evening, I went to George's house. I told him the full plan, minus the federal agent part. I just told him I was going to teach them a lesson and that the Coast Guard might be getting involved. George's eyes twinkled with delight. You're going to strand those two harpies at sea? Buddy, this is your masterpiece. It's like Shakespeare, but with more sunburn. Of course I'll help. I'll set up my telescope. I'll be your eye in the sky. I'll document the whole glorious meltdown. His enthusiasm was a strange comfort. He saw the beautiful, simple justice of it. He saw the humor. It helped me remember that at the heart of this complex federal sting operation was a very simple goal: to give two bullies exactly what they deserved. The choice had been made. There was no turning back. We were no longer just reacting to Linda's tyranny. We were actively plotting her downfall. We had crossed a moral line, moving from defense to offense. We were risking everything. But as Sarah gave my hand a final, determined squeeze, I knew we had made the right choice. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming our lives, our home, and our peace. And if that meant luring two criminals out into the middle of the ocean, Well, that was a risk we were now willing to take. The day of the cruise arrived bright and scorching. A perfect day for a reckoning. I spent the morning meticulously preparing the Aurora, not just tidying the mess from their party, but preparing my stage. I scrubbed the decks, polished the chrome until it gleamed, and stocked a cooler. Quietly, I loosened the anchor chain and coiled it on deck. Once the engines died, nothing would hold bottom. The wine-stained cushions I left as they were, a subtle reminder of their transgression. I also spent an hour in the engine room familiarizing myself with a specific fuel line. It was a simple connection that, if loosened just so, would cause the engines to sputter and die without doing any permanent damage. It was my secret weapon. Sarah played her part perfectly. She went to the community pool radiating cheerful nonchalance. I could see her from my pier, laughing with neighbors, casually mentioning how I'd invited Linda and Melissa out on the boat to bury the hatchet. She was creating the perfect cover story. Meanwhile, across the lawn, I saw neighbor George setting up his birdwatching station on his back porch. His enormous telescope, usually pointed at a family of ospreys, was now aimed squarely at the open water. He gave me a jaunty salute. My team was in position. At precisely 5 o'clock, the Morrison sisters arrived. They were dressed for a photo shoot, not a boat trip. Linda wore a ridiculously large sun hat and white linen pants that were probably worth more than my first car. Melissa was poured into a tiny bikini covered by a sheer wrap that left nothing to the imagination. They sauntered down the pier, their noses in the air, oozing smugness. "Well, well," Linda said, eyeing the boat. "You cleaned her up nicely." "I wanted everything to be perfect for my guests," I said, my smile so wide it made my cheeks hurt. I helped them aboard, trying not to let my skin crawl as I touched their hands. They immediately began to inspect the boat, pointing out things they liked as if they were considering purchasing it. We cast off and headed out onto the open water. The shoreline of Sunset Bay grew smaller and smaller behind us. The small talk was excruciating. They talked about their summer vacation plans, about a new rule Linda was planning to implement regarding lawn ornaments, and about how difficult it was to find good help these days. I just nodded and smiled, steering us further and further from shore. I offered them drinks. They, of course, asked for an expensive Chardonnay I didn't have. I handed them each a bottle of water. Linda looked at it with disdain but took it anyway. After about 45 minutes, we were a good 3 miles out. The shore was a thin, hazy line. No other boats were in sight. It was time. "You know," I said, turning to them, "there's one thing I forgot to thank you for." Linda raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "What's that?" "The evidence," I said. The smile fell from my face, theirs faltered in confusion. I reached under the console and pulled out a small plastic bag. Inside was the fake eyelash. I held it up. "This was stuck right here," I said, pointing to the helm. "Belongs to you, Melissa." Melissa's face went pale. Linda's turned to stone. "I don't know what you're talking about," she snapped. "Oh, I think you do," I said. "And I think the police will too. And my friend at the Coast Guard. They're very interested in people who commit crimes on the water." Just then, as if on cue, the port engine sputtered. Then the starboard one coughed, choked, and went silent. The sudden quiet was deafening, broken only by the gentle lapping of waves against the hull. The boat drifted, dead in the water. The brass fuel line coupling sat warm in my pocket, a thumb-sized trophy that turned twin diesels into floating furniture. Panic began to bloom on their faces. "What was that?" Melissa shrieked. "What's wrong with the boat?" "Engine trouble," I said with a shrug. "Happens sometimes." I walked to the back of the boat where the small inflatable dinghy was tethered. I calmly began to untie it. "What are you doing?" Linda demanded, her voice rising in pitch. "You can't just leave us here." "Of course not," I said, pulling the dinghy alongside. "I'm going for help." I climbed into the dinghy and started its small outboard motor. It purred to life instantly. I looked up at their horrified faces. "You're not a very good criminal, Linda," I said, my voice carrying easily over the water. "You got sloppy. You got arrogant. You left witnesses and evidence everywhere. You thought you were untouchable, but you're just a common thief." I reached into my cooler and pulled out a bottle of cheap, warm rosé. I tossed it onto the deck of the yacht. It landed with a thud. "Refreshments?" I said. "It might be a while." I put the dinghy in gear and started to pull away. The look of pure, unadulterated terror on their faces was everything I had hoped for. The smugness was gone, replaced by the primal fear of being helpless and alone. "You can't do this," Linda screamed, her voice cracking. "I'll have you arrested. I'll ruin you." "You can't ruin me, Linda," I called back over my shoulder. "You already tried. This is me ruining you." I motored a full half-mile into the Atlantic swells, then killed the dinghy's engine and let the waves rock me while I watched. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red. It was beautiful. On the deck of the yacht, two of the ugliest souls I'd ever met were starting to lose their minds. They yelled, they pleaded, they threatened. Melissa started to cry. It was a symphony of desperation. I just sat there, enjoying the show. I checked my watch. Marcus and his team were due any minute. Then, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, I saw it. A dark shape on the water moving fast. And then I heard it, a sound that for Linda and Melissa was the sound of the end of the world. It was the wail of a siren growing closer and closer. But I noticed something else. The wind was picking up and the calm water was starting to get choppy. Dark clouds were rolling in from the east. A storm was coming. And for the sisters, the real storm was just about to make landfall.